a large career in advertising and kind of was going through my life, not really understanding why I was living how I was living and kind of building the facade of what I thought was a perfect life. And behind that, I had lots of childhood trauma and things going on. So in the last couple of years, I've had a spiritual awakening. I've had a complete burn down and rise back up again. And I'm now a somatic trauma informed coach. I specialize in narcissistic abuse, recovery. I help basically exhausted empaths find their power and recover from all sorts of addictions and traumas and codependencies. And I have two parts of my business. I have Talia Coaching, which is my one-to-one coaching business, and I'm also a brand partner of the mental well-being company. So I take out workshops and education into schools, colleges, and corporates as well about this stuff. So I'm trying to take a two-pronged approach to healing.
So I guess my first question for you then is from narcissistic abuse in general, what is that and what can it look like for those who may not know?
So narcissistic abuse is really complicated because it is usually a very private dynamic. And so looking outside in, it's not always really clear what's going on. A lot of it is very hidden, as it were, and you have a lot of victims that sometimes don't even really realize for decades that they are a victim and what they are suffering is abuse. And that is because it goes back to childhood trauma. They've maybe had very unsafe relationships with their parents as children. And so danger and unsafety for them can sometimes look very normal. And so narcissistic abuse is when you have some kind of relationship and there's a power dynamic imbalance, and you'll have one person who is abusing the other person, and the other person is basically creating a trauma bond with that person. So they have very high highs and very low lows, and that creates basically a mind, body, and soul imbalance where one person becomes very addicted almost in many ways to the other person, and that person uses their power and control to abuse the other person. So it will look like grandiosity, gaslighting, lying, keeping that other person isolated, abusing them in many ways, such as financial abuse. There's usually always some kind of financial abuse, which again can be quite complicated. And then there will be things like, cheating, diminishing, convincing that other person that that other person is nothing without the abuser, and keeping them kind of under that person's control. So some people do use the analogy of like Stockholm syndrome. They say it's like Stockholm syndrome, that someone becomes so addicted and so aligned with their abuser that the power dynamics are just completely off. And so narcissistic abuse is really insidious, and it affects people's mental well-being. It affects their physical well-being. They get very dysregulated in their nervous system. They get inflammation. They get sick. They almost have some kind of PTSD, fibromyalgia or IBS, skin issues, hair issues, sleep issues, eating issues. I mean, it affects everything. And again, their soul, they feel drained, they feel absolutely exhausted, and they're kind of a diminished shell of themselves. So it's super, super sad. And it's really hard to see, I think, from the outside and know how to safely intervene because it's dangerous as well.
There's some people that I remember reading online, they believe that there's a specific the victim of narcissistic abuse, they look a specific way.
Mhm.
And I share with people that unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look on it, that is not the case. You can be a victim of a narcissist or narcissistic abuse in any forms. So, what do you think are some of the myths or the misconceptions that you would like to debunk now in regards to who is a victim or who can be a victim of narcissistic abuse?
Yeah, I think victims themselves feel like weak people become victims. The word victim inherently displays a power imbalance, and it feels like it's weak people, people who don't know their own mind, people who are necessarily not very successful. And actually, I see the opposite a lot. I see very, very intelligent people, people who in the past have had quite maybe good intuition and have been able to understand, good people and bad people, beautiful people, successful people, outspoken people, powerful people. Anybody can be a victim of narcissistic abuse, and there are different types of no narcissists, but the covert ones, they really do play the long game. So it's really hard to tell that someone is a narcissist if you don't know all the red flags, and you can be involved with someone for a very, very long time, and they play in the long game. The mask doesn't slip for a long time, and so victims don't know that they're victims for sometimes, like I said, for 10, 20 years, and then by that stage, they're a shell of a person they were. But there is no one way to be a victim of narcissistic abuse.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it's not the barista at the Starbucks down the street. That's going to be that, right? It could be the CEO. It could be someone that's been in finance for 30 years, someone that's been in coaching for 40 years. It could be someone with a government job. It's what I found in a lot of ways. It's someone that is unfortunately maybe looking for some type of validation, or they may have been people pleasers, or they're so used to their love being on conditions, like that
Mhm.
conditional love, that they can fall prey to this. When you mention red flags, what are some of the red flags that you'd like to share for people to help them identify a narcissist in the wild?
So the red flags, when you say them out loud, they seem really obvious. But when, as you say, when you're conditioned in a certain way, you're a people pleaser, you're a codependent, you let a lot of stuff fly because you kind of self-abandon and you focus on someone else. And so when you're not coming from a place of self-knowing and self-worth and self-love, and you're looking for those breadcrumbs of love elsewhere, you accept a lot. But the red flags are things like lying. People who are just really dishonest and lie about everything. People who are grandiose and people who live in a fantasy land. They're not connected to reality. So you'll see things like they have big goals and big dreams, or they're constantly launching businesses, but they're not consistent. They're not putting in the work. They're not putting in the effort to see these things through. And so they essentially they have these big dreams, but they don't work towards anything. And there's some kind of parasitic element to that. So they will always be borrowing money, always asking for money. Usually they are swindling some kind of system, as it were. They like to get one up on people. They talk about, winning all the time in ways that kind of feel a bit icky. So they're dishonest people, and they're people where you can feel that the energy exchange they have with other people is not respectful and it's not balanced. And so red flags are things like someone trying to control you, manipulate you, people who talk badly about other people, people who are misogynistic and racist and want everyone else to be beneath them. That's very narcissistic. And people who come from an insecure ego. And so they're constantly looking to have power and control over others to big themselves up and bring everyone else down.
Made a good point when you said they're looking to build themselves up and bring everyone down. I was speaking to someone and she fell victim to a narcissist, and she was with that person for a number of years. I forget how long. But she said that, Terrain, you know what? I can understand why I ended up with a narcissist. I was like, why? She said, I always wanted someone to tell me that I was beautiful.
Mhm.
No one told me that growing up. I didn't hear it in my teens. I didn't hear it in my adults, but this person came and they said that you're beautiful, you're good looking, right? They would love bomb. Over, they would, I don't want to say overcompensate, but they would endlessly flatter them. And there's nothing wrong with saying that your girl, or your boy, or your husband, or your wife looks good. But this was to the point where it was, what do they call it? Toxic positivity.
Yeah.
Right? And she realized that because that's all she ever wanted, because she would do whatever it took sometimes to just hear those words. She said that, her past relationships, she would do things that would compromise herself to just hear those words.
Mhm.
When you're working with your clients, what do you think are maybe some of the commonalities that come up when they're sharing their own story in maybe some of the trauma that they've experienced, which have in their past, which have led them to this path?
Yeah, when I work with my clients, we go back into childhood and we look at those core inner wounds. And there are a lot of worthiness wounds. So they don't feel worthy, they don't feel important, and they haven't had consistent love that makes them feel connected to other people in a safe and consistent way. So we call it breadcrumbs of love. They're always chasing breadcrumbs, and that is where the codependency and the people pleasing comes from. And so all of my clients will go over and beyond for everybody else. They're codependent, they're people pleaser. They are the people that will abandon themselves, and they will be looking after the household. They'll be doing all the appointments for their children's, for their family. They'll know all of their friends' birthdays. They'll be managing everything. They go above and beyond, and they have a huge heart, and they always want to see the best in people. And again, that's because they haven't had consistent love sort of shown to them. They haven't had it modeled for them. And so they don't really know how to give and receive in a balanced way. So you don't have that reciprocity. You have them always giving, 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 and they give so much, they get drained and they empty their cup. And that is usually because in childhood, there is some kind of parent where they've had an unsafe relationship with, they've had a disconnect. And so they've always been chasing that parent's approval. It might be that they have a father that has never told them, he's proud of them or he loves them, and he's quite disconnected from his emotions, or maybe a mother who's hypercritical. And so they come out and they're kind of perfectionists, and they're just always trying to do the most in order to be claimed worthy and loved and wanted. And it's really sad, so we have to go back and work on worthiness and self-love and abandonment, and get people to a place where they know that they are enough just for being them. And that is a really long journey.
What would be some of the dangers then that those people would face, knowing when you come in contact with them, knowing that their past is having such a significant impact on their present and future?
I mean, all of them suffer some kind of burnout, because you cannot all of your life give so much to the detriment of you and not be completely exhausted and not burn out. They're usually quite bad with money. They will give money away, they will lend money. They're very generous. They're very, very generous, but they can be generous to a fault. And they're very trusting, and they like to see the best in people. They buy into the fantasy as well, and that can be really dangerous when you've got someone coming to you and they're understanding your wounds, because narcissists are very strategic, very strategic. They will figure you out quite quickly what your wounds are. So you talk about, you had a conversation with someone who didn't feel like she was beautiful. She probably gave that little nugget up quite early on, and they jumped on that and they knew, right, that's my lever, that's my manipulation technique. The one I dealt with knew about my childhood experiences. And so he knew for me, family and safety was going to be everything. And he kind of positioned himself as like my savior, my family man, my everything for always. And so it's super dangerous, because they figure out what your weaknesses are and they really pull on them. And because you're coming in and you're playing into that projection, this is what I've always wanted. You ignore all the red flags in the hope that that fantasy is true, and you just play along. You play along because you so desperately want it to be true. And it's really frustrating because you can see the victims have these rose tinted glasses on, and there's really obvious things happening that are wrong, and you bring it up and they're like, they just, it can't land, because for them this is everything they've always wanted, but it's a fantasy and a projection and a manipulation. And once you break that, there's so much grief as well that you need to work through.
You mentioned the childhood and you mentioned the fantasy. There was someone, this man, he shared that he came from a home where he didn't have his mother or he didn't have his mother or his father growing up. He was raised by his grandmother. And he always wanted to have a family because he didn't have it, right? Like a lot of us when we growing up, right? We didn't have something we wanted in our adulthood. So he worked on himself, he did the work, and then he found someone, and he thought that they were on the same page, that they eventually go to work together, come together, get married, and have a family. And he shared this with this woman, this young lady. Just about 2 years later, she ended up just leaving. She's like, you know what? I need to go do this. You know what? I know that's going to hurt you. I know that I've bothered you. I know that I can't make you happy, but I'm going to go over here. And he was devastated.
Hmm.
And I share that because it's like you want something so bad because you didn't have it as a child, so you want it so bad as an adult that sometimes you see your dream in the wrong person. And I think sometimes that happens to some men and women who find themselves in narcissistic relationships where they want it so bad, Tina. They just put their dream in the hands of the wrong person because that person now has been able to identify them, manipulate them, either
Mhm.
financially or they abuse them physically. Um, what are your thoughts on someone wanting something so bad because they didn't have it as a child, and then it's led them to this type of person to be abused in that way?
Yeah, I see that a lot. And narcissists will 100% waste your time for as long as possible, for decades and years. And they have no empathy and they have no shame around it. So they will absolutely try and keep control of you, keep you as supply, keep you serving them with no intention of fulfilling anything they have promised you. So we call it future faking. So they will come in, they will love bomb, they will figure out how to manipulate you, they will future fake. So they will promise, if they know you're desperate for a child, they will promise that child is coming. They will promise that you're going to launch a business together. They will promise that they'll introduce you to their family or that, you'll go traveling and see the world or whatever it might be. But they keep moving the goalposts. They move it a little bit and then it'll be this year and then next year and it can't be now because of this, that, and whatever. And we don't have the money and it's not the right time. But they give you just a little bit of hope and just a little bit of future faking and they keep you hanging on. And if you don't have boundaries, if you don't advocate for yourself, and if you're not willing at certain stages when they're moving those goalposts to say this isn't okay and walk away, then absolutely you can put all of your hopes and dreams into something that will never come to fruition. And then you're left feeling devastated. But the thing is, with narcissistic abuse, sometimes you put so much in for so long, there's false value there. And you think, well, I've already given them 3 years and all my money and all my time. And you kind of feel weird pulling out. It's like the addiction of gambling. You're like, okay, well, I've already spent £1,000 and I want a return on that. So let me just put more money into it in the hope that I get this return. And they are a void. There is no return. There is only draining and emptiness. And coming to that realization is really hard. And that's why you don't make anyone else. You're everything. You have to be your everything. And you have to get into partnership with people with your eyes wide open, with boundaries and understandings of when something isn't working anymore and get out as quickly as possible.
Do you think that is hard for a lot of us to do as we get older in life because we potentially have more to lose?
I think so. I think we feel like the clock is ticking. And I think we're in a rush to meet our goals. And a lot of my clients feel like they're behind. They have this thing with time. They feel like they're not where they're supposed to be. They're behind. They haven't achieved things yet. And so they rush into relationships. They get into situations quite quickly. In the love bombing, you're told very early on that this person loves you, that they're kind of your ride or die, so they'll get you to move in with them quickly. And you put so much in so quickly that it can be quite hard then to extract yourself. And so, you get lost in the source of it all.
Some of the women I work with, they're in their mid to late 40s, 50s, and 60s, and a lot of them think that love has passed them by because love has an expiry. And I would say that no, love is for everyone, regardless of your hair color, your skin color, your eye color, your age, and whatever. But then on the flip side, many of them have been traumatized, and when they get into these relationships, they would ask themselves a question, which they've shared with me: what if there isn't anyone else? And I've heard that a lot from people who've been abused because, to your point, they said, well, it's 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. I'm getting older. Is this it for me? Because I'm not sure if I can find anyone after that. What are your thoughts on that type of mentality, Tina?
Yeah, I hear that a lot, and it's really tricky. And there's kind of two parts to that. There is this energy when you go into any kind of seeking of a relationship from a place of lack. You're not going to attract the best because you're going to be desperate and you're not going to keep your standards high. So, I say to my clients, keep your crown on and know your worth. We are not going and dropping our standards just because we're lonely, just because we're bored, just because we don't want to travel on our own. What we're going to do is we're going to learn how to love our own company, to form really healthy friendships and connections with other people, and to have a really full life. If you want to travel, go and travel. And when you meet the right person and you're in the place of wholeness and healthiness and happiness, you will attract that best energy. So we're not chasing after scraps because we feel like things are urgent. We don't want to be in that energy. On the other side of it, feeling like love has passed you by, or maybe there's nothing good out there. Again, that's mindset. And we want to understand that we are love, and when we treat other people with an open heart, a healed heart, and with boundaries, we're more likely to attract healthy love. If you come into any kind of relationship or dating and you think men suck, women suck, they're rubbish, they're going to ghost me, they're horrible, it's a cesspool out there. That's kind of what you're going to get. That's the frequency you're going to attract. I don't see any of that. I have good, nice conversations because I attract good, nice conversations with people.
How can then someone find their self-worth or their value after it's been tied to traumatic situations for so long?
You have to go on a journey of deep understanding of who you are. And a lot of that is shedding all those old stories and all that old programming. So it's less of a doing something new and becoming, and it's a great release. It's a great shedding. So questioning yourself, if you are about to take a course and that inner critic is saying to you, you can't do this, you're not good enough, you'll fail, it's sitting and asking the questions and journaling and meditating and saying, am I not good enough? Am I not clever? And then demonstrating to yourself all those little goals and things in life you've done that show you are capable and you are consistent and you are strong and you are a good person, and you lean into the energies of that, and you consistently set yourself little small goals and show yourself, reparent yourself, and say, I am good, I am lovable, I am worthy. But it has to go further than affirmations. You have to believe it, you have to really feel it. And that comes through demonstrating that to yourself. And it's a process and it is a journey. For me, I had to release a lot of old conditioning and a lot of old stories about how I wasn't lovable, and I needed to prove myself to other people. I need to earn my love. And now I'm comfortable just being me, and I attract people who love me for being me, and that's so much more fulfilling than trying to become somebody else. And almost then you become manipulative because you're trying to almost trick people into loving you, and you don't need to do that. So it is a journey of self-discovery.
When I went through my journey of self-discovery, I identified some of the issues that I had in my childhood, which I shared numerous times. And one thing that I found is that I wanted something different than my childhood.
Mhm.
What I saw around me, I didn't like. What I saw happening around me, I didn't want to be a part of. And I remember from my childhood to about my 20s, I was doing a lot of people pleasing because that's how I kept people around me. Because growing up, I couldn't keep people around me. And then one day I was like, this isn't sustainable and it's not healthy because I started to struggle with myself.
Mhm.
And I compare it to like addiction where you have to hit rock bottom before you can climb out, and that rock bottom is different for other people. But another thing that I did share with people is that once you take accountability for what you want to do after the traumatic experience, your entire perspective will change. You
Mhm.
begin to see people, it's like you begin to see people in a different light. You see situations in a different light. Tell us about the process when someone is trying to heal and now they're viewing their family, their friends, or even their partners differently. How is that journey?
It's a really tough journey because when you're in people pleasing and codependency, usually the people you have around you will be benefiting from you having no boundaries. So when you're attracting all of these people, and I don't like to judge good or bad, but for the sake of it, they're not the best people. They're people there that want things from you, are taking things from you, and are happy to have you paying for all the dinners, going where they want to go, doing what they want to do, maybe being an addiction or whatever it is. And so going on your journey of self-discovery can feel really scary and lonely. And then I say to my clients, and now we have to cut all these people off. And they're like, what? And it's like all of these people, these hangers on that aren't good for you, that don't build you up, that are taking from you, they've got to go. And so you're even more lonely. And you're in this kind of void, in this space then of discovering who you are, seeing that the people around you that you thought were your best friends or your husband or your partners or whatever actually are part of the problem, having to, remove them or distance yourself from them, and then have that trust and that faith that as you discover yourself, you will find your soul tribe. It can be quite harrowing because you feel really, really alone. But what you will find, and I this hit me really hard, when you're in the people pleasing and you have all of those people around you that are being pleased, when you put your hand up and say, this doesn't work for me anymore, or you try and put boundaries in, or you try and change, they're not going to be there for you anyway. So essentially, that you're not held either way. So you're better off being on your own and removing those people and protecting your energy and then going out and finding new connections. But it is a big journey and you do start to see people quite differently. And you do have to grieve the person you were, the relationships you had, and then have faith that better is coming because you deserve better.
How does the loneliness of self growth in this context impact the person?
It's really difficult for the longest amount of time. I was on my own, really on my own, because I'd left my ex-husband. I'd come out of the narcissistic abuse situationship. I went clean and sober, so I had to cut a load of people off that were not and weren't good for me. I came out of codependent relationships, so I really was on my own. And I kept seeing articles popping up. I work from home as well on my own. I work remotely and I don't have really any family. And I kept seeing articles saying things like, if you don't have 8 hugs a day, you're going to die of loneliness and things like that. And I was like, I haven't touched anyone in about 4 weeks. I've had no hugs. I'm hugless. Oh my God, this is worse than dementia. And you see all of these things come up and you're like, well, I'm just going to be the cat lady here on my own and all the things. But you have to almost go through that process of being deeply alone. I was deeply alone and lonely, but going through that process, I learned how to love my own company and to fill up my time and to do things that are productive, that make me feel good, and to come into kind of union with myself. So I was, for the longest amount of time, just waiting to be rescued and getting annoyed that no one was coming. And then when I realized no one was coming and I started actually doing the real work to rescue myself, that loneliness, I reframed it as really important solitude. It was a moment of pause, why I resetted and had a change in direction. And when I gave it that kind of positive energy, I started to feel less lonely and kind of more just in my bubble.
I've seen people struggle with that, the loneliness aspect, to the point where they actually would relapse
Mhm.
and or go back to the friend group. Like I've seen people who on their journey to healing from, let's say, narcissistic abuse, or let's say people pleasing, or just saying being used in general, they
Mhm.
begin to identify, okay, this person is using me this way, this person's using me this way. And then one of the obstacles that they face is that they begin to see people who are further along that journey and they don't see these other areas of being used.
Mhm.
But then what happens is they begin to think, am I worthy to be around these people? Because I know this group, and this group, I'm a little bit better than others. But this group, what if I'm not good enough because I think I'm not good enough? Like, how does the self-worth affect those who are healing from abuse to maybe accept a new identity, but instead of accepting it, they're rejecting it because they don't feel that they're worthy of the new identity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I see a lot of people in the void, as it were, where they haven't quite embodied the new them. And so they don't feel like they're quite ready in the shift. And a lot of people when they come out of abuse, they are quite shy because they don't trust themselves, they haven't spoken up for themselves, they don't advocate for themselves. So they're not usually the most outgoing person that will go and talk to a new group or introduce themselves to someone else or go and present themselves in a certain way. So they can look standoffish, they can look shy, and when they don't feel worthy, it is it's tempting to run back to what you know. So what I recommend is embodiment work. So a lot of embodiment work I did. I worked within Sabrina Lynn within Rewilding for Women, and I got into the inner circle, which is called Living Close to the Bone, and I did a lot of embodiment work. And I did embodiment work really deep in the trauma. I worked with Kali, Medusa, Lilith, and I kind of got out all of that dark goddess energy. And then I moved into kind of more loving energy, like Mary Magdalene, and I kind of worked on my heart chakra. And then I moved into kind of different types of embodiment in terms of confidence and in terms of the kind of coach I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up in the world. And I just stayed really focused on what are the attributes I want to embody, who else embodies them, and how can I naturally start conversations where we have something in common. And you can go and just ask questions and say, how did you get here on your journey? Would you recommend anything? And just gently start to ease yourself into those conversations. It takes energy work. If I'm honest, I think you can't think your way into your mindset. You do really need to feel it and embody it. So embodiment work for me is really important, and it can move you along. And once you get quite far along on that, that's when you can start to do things like manifestation and all of that good stuff. So it really should be part of your journey.
When you're helping clients and they've been people pleasing or they've been in those situations for so long, and for a lot of them, it's probably comfortable. How much of an impact does that level of comfort in the chaos maybe impact the progress that they're going to make to stop people pleasing and come out of the traumatic experience?
That's usually really difficult within family units. I see my clients do quite well, sometimes putting up boundaries at work, putting up boundaries within relationships. They might say to a certain friend, stop calling me now all the time with this problem. You don't listen to my problems, or they might put some boundaries around their time. When it comes to a relative that always needs them, a mother or a father, a dad, a sister, whatever it might be, they're not the best at putting those boundaries in. There's still that sense of guilt. They have a deep sense of guilt, and I have to work with them on rescuing. And we do a lot of conversation around what's empowering versus what's enabling. And I put the emphasis back on them to say, are you empowering this person through love by giving them some help and support and a container, but allowing them to solve their own problems? Or are you rescuing? Are you enabling? And actually, do you think that's helpful? Do you think you're helping that person on the other end of it? Or are you making your situation worse and their situation worse? And then when you kind of flip the people pleasing back on the person on the other side, usually the people pleaser will say, well, no, actually, maybe I'm not empowering that other person. And me taking it, it gives them an excuse to remove the guilt, to put that boundary back in to empower. So we have a lot of those conversations. And usually with a parent, they will keep slipping back, but they do it very, very gradually.
How much of an impact does the guilt that they may have to leave people behind affect these people?
Yeah, it's really hard, and the people being left behind, they don't take it lying down. So you will end up with, friendship groups freezing you out or kind of almost, bullying you and saying things like, oh, you've changed. You think you're better than everyone else. You're moody now, whatever it might be. Why are you like that? And you can feel like you have people turning against you. And when you have a smear campaign running at the same time, and you've got those worthiness wounds, you really think you are the problem, that you are the problem. You're creating all of this drama, you're upsetting everybody. Why are you like this? And again, a lot of that comes to having faith in the fact that you are on this earth for a reason, for a bigger purpose, and you are working into your true self and into your true purpose. And all of that external noise is noise. And I say to them, put your blinkers on and stay in your lane and really just stay focused on yourself. If it doesn't feel good, then it's not for you. And we have to keep coming back into the body and into that self-belief of knowing that, you are amazing and everything else is just kickback. It's ripples in the water of the change you're creating.
Someone once shared that she was making changes in her life and her friends began to become aware of this. And to
Mm,
your point, they began to bully her and say that you've changed. The verbal abuse, what began as a joke,
mhm,
was becoming very serious and even more serious to the point where she felt very isolated
mhm,
because of this. And she was in a relationship at the time, and the person she was with was very supportive of it, but she just couldn't shake
mhm.
what the people who she thought were her friends were saying about her. So she ultimately stopped her healing journey. She ended her relationship. She went back to who she was, and she did it. I remember speaking to her. She's like, it's not that I'm more happy,
Mm.
it's that I'm hearing less harsh words. And then I asked her, I was like, how do you think your partner, who you now have ended the relationship, feels that you've turned your back on all the progress, you've turned your back on him, on everything to be a part of a group that weren't supportive in you being a better person? What are your thoughts on situations like that, Tina, where someone is improving, they find peace, they find happiness, but because the old life is trying to pull them back in, they give up everything for it?
But really bad. I really felt that in my little empath heart. That breaks my heart that someone is going through their soul's growth and is coming into the person that they really should be and coming into their authentic self. And they have been bullied and pulled back and sucked down into, low vibrational relationships that are going to make them feel less than. It's really, really sad. When I went clean and sober, it will be 2 years in March. I had to leave a lot of thanks. I had to leave a lot of relationships behind. And it really triggered those people because when you start to grow and you reject things that are bad for you, you are showing, and there's no scale on like how bad people are in their addiction. All addiction is bad, but I was pretty, I wasn't in the best place. I was consistently for a long time, you know, clearly struggling with addiction. And so the fact that I can do it, the fact that I healed and I walked away from those things shows everyone else that it's possible. And that was part of my journey. I want to inspire other people. They were not inspired. They almost took it as a slight against them because it shines the spotlight on the fact that they're not doing their work. They can go clean and sober and they're choosing not to. It is a choice. It is a choice. I've been through it. They're choosing not to. And so they say things like she's up herself. She thinks she's better than everyone else. And at that time I also was being stalked and I had CPTSD, so I had agoraphobia. So I really wasn't going out. And so I just really cut off contact for that reason. And I cut off contact because I was going through other things. And I would be removed from WhatsApp groups and I knew they were talking about me and I would hear people coming back and saying things. And for me, that just proved to me even more why I wouldn't go back. Those weren't my people. They're not your people. They don't want you to be well. And as I've kind of gone through my glow up, as it were, I notice them unfollow me. They don't buy my book. They don't repost my stuff. They don't like my stuff. And it's like, cool, you can be a hater then. You can be part of the growth and you can love and support me or not. That's your choice. I would still have a relationship with you either way. I do have friends that are still doing what they're doing. And they think they're happy doing that, and I don't do it with them, but they're still friends and they're good friends to me. They're just dealing with their own stuff over there. So it's possible to have some kind of respectful engagement, even if you're on different paths. But I would never go back now. For me, anyway, their energy frequency feels so off that I would shut down around them and not feel safe to even open up, as it were. So I would say stay focused and stay on your lane. But yeah, that makes me incredibly sad. But it's hard not to panic and not to run back to what you know.
It's very sad, and I feel for the person, the man in this case who lost his partner because it's not that he did something wrong. It's just the person essentially has given up on the person that they're becoming and everything that was being created from that energy. And if I look at it from the woman's perspective who went back, I don't see how someone can be in that situation for long term because their perspective is changed. Like they're even though they've gone back, they're still not that person because
Hmm.
they see things differently. In that same situation, if that person came to you now and they're like, Tina, you know what? I screwed up.
Hmm.
I destroyed my relationship. I stopped doing this. I want to get it all back.
Hmm.
How would we what advice in general would you give to that person, or what direction maybe would be a better question? What direction would you give to that person who maybe after a year, 2 years or so, maybe even 6 months, realize, you know what, these people really aren't for me, and I want to get back what I had, which I gave up for them.
I think you start with a whole load of self-forgiveness. So I would say it's okay. It's really okay. It's a journey and it's not linear. And you haven't lost everything you learned before. You didn't, give it all back. You had a slip back into what you know. And your body and your nervous system and your programming will do that. Forgive yourself because you went back into old programming. And now let's go on a discovery of the why. What was it that felt safe over there? Why did that happen? And then how can we stop doing that again? And a lot of my clients, when we first start working together, we do a friend cleanse and we make a big circle, we draw a big circle and we say, this is my inner circle. These are the people a little bit on the outside. Here's people more on the outside. And then here are kind of the wider associates. And then what do I tell people in each circle? Who has access to me? So you don't have to cut everyone off immediately, but you start pulling back. You don't tell people certain things. You don't give them as much access to you. And you slowly start to reassess your circles and who has positions where and why, what values you respect within them and not. And then we start to reframe it based on your wants and needs and desires. What kind of people do you want in your circle? Because you get to choose. And when you put the empowerment back on them, they do tend to start to choose better.
So, one final question, Tina, before I let you go. I want to give you three wishes, and you can wish for anything that you want, except for, of course, more money and more wishes. What are three things you wish people knew about creating safe and healthy boundaries and why?
Safe and healthy boundaries. I wish people knew that boundaries are not selfish and that you can create boundaries from love, and that boundaries are not weapons or tools to be used to hurt the other person. They are your best friend to protect you. So you can have boundaries and you can express them lovingly and you can withhold your boundaries. No one has to approve your boundaries. No one has to give your permission.